This episode is brought to you by the American Waterways Operators.
The American Waterways Operators is proud to serve as the tugboat, towboat, and barge industry's advocate, resource, and united voice for safe, sustainable, and efficient transportation on America's waterways, oceans, and coasts. This National Maritime Day, we honor the mariners who move America's cargo across our nation and the vital contributions they make to our economy, security, environment, and quality of life. To learn more about this essential industry and about the American Waterways Operators, visit AmericanWaterways.com.
Welcome back to Between the Levees. Today's guest came recommended by Mr. Mark Canoa himself. Finally, months later, I am joined by Ms. Jennifer Carpenter, the President and CEO of the American Waterways Operators. Ms. Carpenter, thank you for joining me.
Tim, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Glad we could finally make this work. Well, you know how this goes. Please tell me, where were you born?
St. Louis, Missouri.
And what led you to the industry eventually? Were your parents in the business?
No. So I joke that even though I grew up in St. Louis, I had to come to DC to discover the barge industry. It's so crazy. I grew up in St. Louis and, I'd go down to a Cardinals game or something at the old Busch Stadium and see the tows on the river. I had absolutely no idea what this industry was all about and how important it is, and fell in love with it when I came to DC. And now I am, an evangelist for it.
Well, I'm sure we'll follow your path all the way to DC, but let's start back in St. Louis. What did your parents do for a living?
So my mom was a homemaker. My dad was a doctor, and grew up in St. Louis, kind of West County. And when I go back out there now, it's just amazing to me to see how, that part of the area has changed since I was there.
Well, tell me about growing up in St. Louis.
Yeah, so, I was just kind of an ordinary kid, and had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. At one point, I thought I might like to be a spy. Seriously, I thought it would be fun to be like a female James Bond, but that probably wouldn't be conducive to longevity. So I'm glad that I found the river industry instead.
Were you drawn to anything in school growing up?
Yeah, I was always really interested in international relations, in politics and government. And I love the idea of kind of being an intermediary or a bridge builder, somebody who tried to kind of help people come together. So I was actually interested, once I decided being a spy wasn't the best career path for me, I thought about going into the Foreign Service. Thought it might be interesting to be a diplomat. Eventually decided, kind of the lifestyle of living here and there for a couple of years at a time was probably not what I wanted to do. But that same desire to try to bring people together to work things out was really what attracted me to government relations.
What along the way sort of brought that forward in your I guess your life's purpose? What made you so interested in politics and government?
I'm interested in how people come together to try to get things done. I'm interested in, I kind of approach the world as most people have good hearts and are trying to do the right thing, and, have a perspective which is informed by how they grew up and their personality and all of that. And, so many of our challenges in life and in this world kind of happen when we're not listening to each other. We're not kind of taking the time to understand where are you coming from, which, doesn't mean at all that we're always going to agree, because no way we're not. But, just, I think a real curiosity, Tim, like wanting to understand, hey, where are people coming from, and recognizing that we're not always going to agree and people are coming from different places. There's a lot of stuff we got to get done. How do we do that? How do we harness that? And, I think there's a lot of that goes into politics and government. And when it's working well, that is what it should be about.
Well, in relative terms, this podcast has been an interesting experience. Seeing all the backgrounds that come together to unite in this little industry we're trying to operate. But it is like I was never drawn to politics or anything like that on my own, but it is very interesting to see the countless perspectives that walk into doing this one thing we're all trying to do. But nonetheless, did you attend college?
I did. And so that's how I got to Washington, D.C. I went to Georgetown. I did not play basketball. Of course, Georgetown was great at basketball when I was there. They have not recovered their lost glory, but that's how I got to D.C.
Where did you study in college?
So I studied international relations, and then I had a minor in Asian studies. And actually studied Chinese for 3 years in college, ended up spending quite a bit of time in Taiwan and actually doing a graduate fellowship there after I finished up. So that was a fascinating perspective. One of the things that helped me realize, while traveling and learning about other cultures and experiencing them is something that I love, fits into that, just being curious about the world and about what makes other people tick, was one of the things that helped me realize, that the kind of foreign service lifestyle wasn't something that I wanted, but it was a fantastic experience.
Tell me about your time in Taiwan.
It was really interesting. So I was first there for a summer between my junior and senior year of college, studying Chinese. And that was a fascinating experience because, here I am, this, 17-year-old girl from St. Louis. I knew that I was going to be I knew where I was going to be taking classes. And that was like all I knew. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know what else I was going to do. Figured I probably was going to need some kind of job, and I'd figure it out when I got there. So I get to Taipei in the middle of the night. It's like, man, I thought a St. Louis summer could be hot and humid. This was like St. Louis, New Orleans, Houston, like on steroids. It was like, oh my God, it's 3 a.m. and it's like, 90 degrees and 80% humidity. And I, knew that I was going to stay that first night at the YMCA. That was about all I knew. And, I had to figure it out. I had to find a place to live, and found a part-time job teaching English. And it was a fascinating learning experience. And then I ended up going back and spending about a year there after I graduated.
Were you studying Chinese language?
Yeah, so I was in the Foreign Service School at Georgetown, and I had studied Spanish in high school, but to graduate from the Foreign Service School, you had to pass a language proficiency test. And I thought, man, I do not want my graduation to be contingent on passing a proficiency test in Chinese. That sounds like a big roll of the dice. So I took a year of Spanish and I got through that. And then I really wanted to study Chinese. So I gave it a go. I have forgotten a lot of it since then.
Was it Mandarin or Cantonese or both?
It was Mandarin. Yeah.
Okay.
So the characters are the same, but the spoken is completely different. So when I went to Hong Kong and heard them speaking Cantonese, I had to write stuff down. Choice A would have been if they could speak English. Choice B was to write things down because totally different dialects.
How many characters in that alphabet?
Oh my gosh, thousands.
Yeah.
It is a real, it's a real challenge.
I had enough trouble with Spanish, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
So you finished college. Where does your career take you? Where does your life go from there?
So I finished college, I go to Taiwan, I spend a year there on a fellowship, which was truly fascinating, working, going to school, realized when I'm over there, don't want to do the foreign service. So I come back to DC and I'm thinking, okay, I want to get into government relations. The same thing that sounded interesting to me about the foreign service of kind of being that bridge builder, somebody who brings people together, sounded interesting, sounded like government relations might be a good fit in terms of being kind of the intermediary between businesses and government. So there were probably any number of industries, that might have been appealing to me. But I stumbled upon AWO and the barge industry very much by chance, like total serendipity. And again, didn't know anything about the barge industry except that, it existed in the place that I was from, St. Louis, which sounded pretty interesting. What I did not know when I got hired as, the trade association equivalent of a green deckhand was that it was a time of total transformation in the industry. I literally started work at AWO the week that the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 was enacted into law. So that was a fascinating time to come into the industry. It was that was basically the congressional response to the Exxon Valdez. Didn't have anything to do with a tugboat or a barge, but it was just a transformation in the way that marine transportation, especially oil transportation, but really marine transportation generally, was regulated in the US. So it was like just getting in at the ground floor of a total transformation. And it was also a time of, generational change in the industry. It was such a fork in the road that there were a lot of owners who, had to kind of answer the question for themselves. Is this the industry that I want to be part of going forward, or would now be a good time to maybe sell and go do something different? So it was just really a fascinating time to come into the industry. And, I ended up just falling in love with it.
And you said that was 1990?
That was 1990. Yes. So
you spent 33 years with AWO?
Spent 33 years with AWO. In the intervening time, I went back to grad school and got a master's in conflict resolution. I got married. I had 3 kids. And, kind of at each point in my career where I, was, is it time to do something different? We were able to kind of morph and stretch and change my responsibilities. And I was able to keep making a contribution to an industry that, like I said, I just really kind of fell in love with. It's the best way to describe it.
Well, what did you start out doing? Walk me through your career progression to now.
Yeah, sure. So I started out as a government affairs assistant. I was brand new. I was basically supposed to be helping review, basically helping my boss, who was responsible for regulatory affairs, manage this new regulatory portfolio affecting the industry. So the Oil Pollution Act of 1990, like I mentioned, congressional response to these catastrophic spills required something like 80 rulemaking projects of the Coast Guard. It was like Coast Guard just basically go remake the way that vessels carrying oil in the US are regulated. And so, I didn't know anything about anything. I knew how to, I was a good researcher and I was a pretty good writer, but I had no knowledge of anything. And so I'm there helping my boss and just learning, a lot of learning, and just kind of grew from there. So I became the manager of regulatory affairs, and then the director of government affairs, and then the vice president of regulatory affairs, and eventually the senior vice president of government affairs, and eventually the executive vice president, and finally the president of AWO. And that took me 33 years, but it's been a heck of a ride.
How long have you been president?
3 years, 3.5 years. Became president on January 1st, 2020, just in time for COVID. So talk about, getting into something at a dynamic time.
If you can recall details of such things, tell me about some industry changes you've witnessed in 33 years.
Oh, yeah. Tim, and that is actually one of the things that has been so fascinating, gratifying about, a long career in this industry is I'm, a middle-aged person now, and I can look back and say, I remember when we were just starting on that, and we've seen that transition, and look where we were and look where we are, and I would say, let's start with safety. The leadership that our industry showed in not only stepping up to comply with a whole new set of regulations, but then asking ourselves, hey, where do we need to do things different and better? And how do we make that happen? That's been fascinating. And I feel like, the journey was kind of early stages of it. Implementation of the Oil Pollution Act, we had to kind of get in the mode of working with government. So before then, it was kind of like Coast Guard, hands off. We know what we're doing. We know how to run this. Do not tell us what to do. We know more about it than anybody, for sure. But, there was a realization in the industry, hey, the Coast Guard's got to write 80 new rules. Are we going to just let them do that on their own and hope they get it right? Or are we going to get in there and say, okay, you got to do this. We know something about this. Let's work together. And, the results were much better because we did that. And so some of those lessons, like, we can work to make things better, and we can work with government, and we're back to something I said at the beginning. We are not always going to agree, but we can come together and we can try to make things better than they would be otherwise. That same kind of thought process went into the development of the responsible carrier program in the early 90s, which was a industry developed safety management system, grew out of a terrible accident, and members saying, hey, what are we going to do to really make sure that we're running things as safely as we can? The establishment of a formal partnership with the Coast Guard to look at how can we promote best practices for safety and environmental stewardship without waiting for an accident or a regulation, all the way on through to, this industry volunteering for what became Subchapter M. And, that was very much based in a desire to make the industry safer, but it was also really cold, hard risk management calculus. It was like, hey, we are going to be better off, if we can take some proactive action to position ourselves as inspected vessels, not as uninspected vessels, to do that when we can have a significant influence into how these regulations are going to look, and not, sort of be on the receiving end of a governmental response to an accident, which is never a position of strength. And so, man, when I look back and, imagine telling Jennifer, in August of 1990 that, 33 years later, all towing vessels are going to have COIs under something called Subchapter M. And by the way, that's going to be something that we signed up for, not that was forced on us. I would have been like, man, are you nuts? But, this industry is safer than it's ever been. And that's fantastic for the people who work in it and everybody who relies on us.
Well, thank you for that. Walk me through a day in the life of the president of AWO.
It's busy and it's fun. I sort of look at, my role as having kind of three main aspects to it. Say I'm the chief relationship officer, the lead advocate, and the facilitator of staff success. And I try to make sure that, kind of those three parts of my portfolio are relatively balanced. So in terms of, chief relationship officer, I work for AWO's members. And so it is just critically important that I am spending time with them, whether that's in person, at their places of business, whether that's on a Zoom call like this, whether that's on the phone, just understanding what they're experiencing, what they're dealing with, what they need, trying to make sure that, I understand not only what they need today, but what they're going to need so AWO can stay ahead of that. So a lot of time spent working with members to make sure that they're getting what they need from AWO. Lead advocate, we've got a fantastic staff advocacy team who are over at the Coast Guard, who are on Capitol Hill, who are working with state governments day in and day out. But as the president, that is a fundamental part of my job too. So, meeting with regulators, meeting with legislators, and telling the story of our industry, telling them what we need and why it matters. A piece of that is also telling our story in the public arena. So, giving interviews, speaking at conferences, making sure, that we are talking to the folks who need to understand what our industry does and why it's important. And, as we do that, Tim, it's important. We don't just talk to each other. We're talking to folks who really need to hear the story because they haven't heard it before. Sometimes they're receptive. Sometimes I did a interview earlier this year with, a guy who really wanted to do a hatch hatchet job on the Jones Act. And it was like, okay, let me at it, because that story is not going to be better if we don't show up and proudly tell our story. So, that's, yeah, I'll take one for the team. I'll take one for the team with pleasure because, this is a story that needs to be told. And then the third piece, facilitator of staff success. We got a fantastic team here who is so dedicated to working for AWO members. And I need to make sure that they have what they need. They've got timely decisions where they need them. They've got the resources that they need, they are supported and empowered to really go and do their jobs.
How frequently are you interfacing with the Coast Guard personnel and potentially appearing maybe before Congress, or do you do things to that level?
Yeah, absolutely. So my colleague Caitlin Stewart is our VP for Regulatory Affairs, and she does a fantastic job. Members of her team, our regional team, are interfacing with the Coast Guard every day. But that is a very important part of my job too, is, building and maintaining those relationships. And a good thing about, being kind of an old timer now is having had the opportunity to build relationships over a period of time. So working with admirals that were lieutenant commanders, when we started working together. And you always want in the advocacy business to make sure that, you have open communications channels and you have relationships in place before you, quote, need them. You don't want to go talk to somebody, whether it's a Coast Guard admiral, a member of Congress, and say, hey, we got a problem and we need your help in fixing it. And, they're like, who are you? I've never met you before. That goes much better when there's a good foundation. So we spend a lot of time trying to lay those foundations, make sure we have the relationships in place so that when we do need each other, we can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is Jennifer. We're on a first name basis. And man, we really got a situation with this low water. We need much more expeditious, placement of buoys or whatever it is. Hey, we've got a situation here that would really benefit. Your team's doing a great job. We've got a situation where, your personal attention is needed. And we do the same thing, Tim, on Capitol Hill. Right now we've got literally 82 new members of the House and Senate who were elected the first time last November. Out of 535, that is a big percentage. And so we got to get in there and tell them who the tugboat and barge industry is, why it matters to their state and their district. That's great fun. And as you can see, I love the industry. I'm passionate about it. And so it just, I feel like, man, this is a dream job, going in and telling them something cool that they need to know, but may well not.
What was one of the most astonishing or surprising things when you found yourself involved in this industry?
Oh, geez. I think how important it is and how much of what it does people don't see in the course of their everyday life, right? So we've all been on the highway behind the, long line of semi trucks. We've all been stopped at, the railroad crossing. I was lucky enough to grow up in St. Louis. There's a lot of people who don't live anywhere near them. They just don't know. Like, how does this happen? So I felt like, kind of discovering this industry was, it was kind of like finding a buried treasure. And then, you sort of, I'm mixing metaphors now, but you peel back the layers. So it's not only, oh, this is this industry that I didn't understand at all that does all of this really important stuff, whether it's, moving agricultural commodities for export or moving the petrochemicals that keep the lights on. But then just like meeting the people and realizing, wow, what an amazing group of individuals it is who make this industry go. Just their passion, their knowledge, their love for what they do, it's infectious. And so, that began to then make my mission, my job here, personal, because it's not only I believe in what this industry does, but it's also, oh yeah, I want to be working to, protect, advance the interests of, support the people of this industry, whether that's the folks on the boats, the folks in the office, the folks shoreside, because man, they're doing great stuff and it's a privilege and a pleasure to work for them.
What's the biggest success you think you've been a part of over the years?
Oh, wow. Good question. I mean, I think I would have to say um, supporting the industry's uh, evolution from a safety standpoint. And through advocacy and leadership that enabled sort of that transformation to take place in an orderly way. I mean, the industry has evolved. It is not the same industry that it was, in 1990. And, I'm not minimizing the challenges, hiccups, hurdles, expense, everything that went into, getting to where we are today. But when you sort of step back, it's like, man, big picture, that went really well. This industry really presided over its own transformation, did it in an orderly way that, kept customers' cargo move, wasn't like, oh man, we're going to have just a stop work here because we are so busy trying to implement subchapter M, or it was like, no, we're going to be able to carry out the mission better because we are leveling up from a safety standpoint. So that's been really cool. I'm also extremely proud of how our industry has really raised its profile and reputation in Washington, on Capitol Hill with the agencies. I think that our industry is increasingly understood and respected as a safety leader, as a sustainability leader, the most, environmentally efficient way to move bulk commodities. We are recognized as good guys. We are recognized as part of the solution to so many things, and that didn't happen automatically. It happened because we, as an industry, put in the effort to build relationships and keep building them. And, sometimes people are, God, when can we stop doing this? Never, because it is a constant crop of new decision makers who need to understand. And, we've been able to do that over time, but really level up. And so I'm really proud of the reputation that our industry has been able to build. It's deserved. We did the work and we told the story. And it's like, you got to do both, right? You can't, like, the story is hollow if you're telling it and there's no there. Oh, we're saying we're great and, we're okay. That's not good. But it's also kind of a tree falling in the forest if you're doing all the work on the safety and the sustainability side, but nobody knows about it. Well, it's better than not having it happen, but it's not delivering maximum results.
Well, it would certainly seem you're at least mildly interested in what you do for a living. But as president and CEO of AWO, are you at the top of the hill? Is this where you want to retire, or what's the future of your career?
Oh man. So I don't know. I'm not retiring anytime soon. I got 3 kids. And yeah, none of them are done with school yet. So I think I got quite a few working years ahead of me. It has been really cool over the last 3 years to feel like, I'm in a position to take lessons learned, to take experience from earlier in my career and, give back to the industry, to the AWO staff. I'm in a position to do more, because of the job that I'm really blessed to have. So right now, I feel like I've got my dream job and I look forward to continuing to do that and, continuing to level up. I mean, that's kind of a theme too. It's like, you just gotta, you got to keep moving forward or you fall behind. I mean, that's true as an industry, that's true in the advocacy arena. So I don't look at it as, oh, I got my dream job. I'm the president of AWO and I'm so thankful for that. I am so thankful for that. But, that's not like, so here I sit. It's like, here we go, like, let's keep climbing. And I'm really energized by the challenges ahead.
You're telling me. So before we jump to some chat about your family and things like that on the personal side, uh, is there a message you would have for a brand new green deckhand or a brand new pilot in a wheelhouse that really may not know anything about AWO?
Yeah, I would say you are doing incredibly important work in an industry that can give you a fantastic career, and AWO is here, to support you, to support this industry as we go forward. So AWO is here to try to make things better for the whole industry. And I would say, I would want them to understand, we're working for you. We want you to be able to, go get when you're ready to go get your license, whether that's your tankerman's ticket or you're moving up into the wheelhouse, we are going to be working. So that is an efficient, smooth process, and you're not getting hung up. We are working, so you're not dealing with crazy red tape. You go get a TWIC and you're spending 4 hours out of your life driving around doing this. If there are things that are making it difficult for you to do your job, man, I hope you're talking with the folks in your company about that, and they're sharing those with AWO so we can work on those. Because this industry is about people, and the industry can't do what it does without you being able to do your job. And so if there's things that are getting in the way of that, man, that's what AWO is here to work on. That's what we're here to help.
And how best might a mariner contact your organization, your team, should they have concerns or questions or anything?
So, I would encourage folks, every company is different. So I would encourage folks, talk to folks in your organization and kind of see what makes sense for them. We're happy to take questions from and try to help any employee of an AWO member company. But, if you see an opportunity there, so, we always say to our member representatives, hey, bring a mariner along to an AWO meeting. Hey, we're doing a virtual meeting. Blast this out. So folks on the boats, so folks who, can't tune in at 2 p.m. on Thursday, can watch this at their leisure. So different companies have different ways of doing things, and I want to respect what that is. I would want all mariners, all employees of AWO members to know, like, AWO is here for all of you. It's not like the benefits of membership are for are for your VP of HR or your director of operations or, whoever. No, we're here to support this company, this industry. So talk to who you need to internally, find out how you can get plugged in. We love to have members with, kind of multiple individuals, multiple team members involved on our work, because we get so much perspective that way,
What sorts of industry issues that we're facing are being addressed now in government, and like what's, I guess, I don't know if it's project based or sort of topic based, but what sorts of things is your team working on now?
Yeah. So I'll name a couple. Sustainability. So a lot of focus on environmental issues. And, that's something that's going to continue, because that's not being driven just by like one party in Washington. That's something that, is being driven by industry customers, and it's going to be really important. So we're taking kind of a 3-step approach to that, big picture. Barge transportation is the most environmentally beneficial way to move goods. So if we want to help the environment, step one, let's maximize the amount of cargo we move on the water. That's kind of low-hanging fruit. Step two, let's make sure that the marine transportation system is operating as efficiently as possible. If we are queued up at locks burning fuel because we've got old, outdated, inefficient structures on the river, that's not good environmentally any more than it is good economically. So let's make sure that, infrastructure dollars are really being invested so that we can move smoothly and efficiently through the system. And then the third piece is really, supporting companies in kind of taking the next step, whatever their business drivers are. So, there are companies that are experimenting with alternative fuels, and we need to help them and make sure that, you know, they're not dealing with Coast Guard regulations of yesteryear that are making it hard for them, you know, to innovate and to do new things. At the same time, we need to recognize, you know, if you're moving rocks on the Cumberland River, you may not have a customer who says, oh, you know, I'm gonna invest in a, you know, methanol to hydrogen towboat. But you know, you could take the next step of going from a tier 1 to a tier 3 engine. That could be tremendously helpful to the environmental footprint of the whole industry. What support do you need? How can AWO help make sure that there is funding, there are resources that will help you to do that? So we want to kind of meet and support AWO members where they are. Personnel and workforce is another big issue. So, you know, we had a long-term need to make sure that we've got a great pipeline of people coming into this industry to work on vessels, to work shoreside. That's important to, you know, national and homeland security. It's important to keeping the industry moving. So how can we support members in telling the industry story? How can we partner with other organizations that are working in this area so that folks know this is a fantastic career path? How can we work with the Coast Guard, with Congress, to make sure that there aren't, you know, barriers and obstacles along the way that just really discourage and frustrate people? You know, so I mentioned licensing and credentialing earlier, you know, and we just, God, you don't want to have somebody who's on their, you know, 4th issue of their license finally just say, forget it. You know, this is, I don't need this anymore. This is driving me nuts. They deserve a better and more efficient system. So working on those kinds of issues, I think, you know, we were dealing with a real acute personnel shortage, you know, mid to late last year. I'm hearing from some members that some of that acute pressure is abating in some areas. That's great, but we got a long-term need here. So I think this is something as AWO, we're gonna stay focused on. We're not gonna, you know, 6 months from now say, got that personnel thing, you know, checked off. We're good.
I know it's a system-wide issue, but what sorts of things are you seeing system-wide, industry-wide, that are causing crewing issues for us?
Yeah, you know, so I think we had a lot of challenges kind of in the COVID and emerging post-COVID environment where, you know, we had some folks who left the industry, either, you know, just didn't want to be on a boat with other people, and didn't feel like that was the safest choice for them. We had folks who were like, hey, I want to go in business on my own. You know, my brother-in-law and I are going to start a construction company, or so, yeah, just kind of looking at new opportunities. So we had some folks who left the industry. And then we have, you know, the challenge, we've got a workforce, sort of a demographic workforce challenge in this country generally. You hear about this, you know, from just industries across the board. So we face some of those same challenges that everybody else does, but we've got special challenges. You know, you and I both know all the things that make this such a cool place to make a living, but not everybody, you know, wants to be on a boat. Not everybody wants to be deployed for a period of time. So we need to understand, you know, that we're going to have to deal with the same workforce challenge as everybody else. And then we've got a unique lifestyle, which can be really awesome. It can be a selling point. It's not going to be for everybody, but it can be a selling point, and we got to get out and tell that story.
All right, jumping over to family. Tell me about what does your husband do for a living, and tell me about your children.
So my husband works for the government. He works, he's a lawyer here in DC. I got 3 kids, 19, 17, and 15. My oldest son is a freshman in college. My middle guy is a junior in high school. And baby girl is not a baby girl. She's a 15-year-old freshman in high school.
What is your oldest studying?
He is studying history. So this is pretty funny because we've actually talked about the marine industry. His dream job actually would be to be a history teacher or professor. And I think he'd be fantastic at that. You know, he loves to teach. He's a history nerd. He's got a real passion for it. But every now and then, you know, he'll be like, I don't know, you know, the academic job market, it's rough. I'm like, hey, consider the marine industry. You're not on a boat all the time. You can walk out on your history stuff and then you can get on a boat and make some money. So we'll see. Yeah, history is what he's studying now.
Do you expect the younger two to possibly to follow in your footsteps? Do you see a passion for collaboration in any of them?
It's going to be really interesting to see what they all do. I do feel like Chris is kind of a natural teacher. My middle son, he's an awesome kid, just a very, just like a really thoughtful, creative person. He is 17 years old. He's got no idea what he wants to do with the rest of his life. I totally get that. So I don't know what he's going to do, but I know he's going to be great. And it's going to be fun to just kind of be part of, helping him figure out what it is. I think my daughter, man, she's a future CEO. She is, 15, and man, she can whip all kinds of chaos into shape. So we'll see what that looks like.
Well, good for them and good for you. Not that you have not said enough in this conversation, by any means, but do you have any sort of final thoughts, closing thoughts for the industry, for anybody that might be listening or watching?
Oh man, I guess I would just say I feel so blessed, privileged, just delighted to be part of this industry. And that's what I would want people to hear, is just like, what you do is important, it matters, it is inspiring to others. You may not have met me, but I'm inspired by what you do. And just the sort of what we can do when we work together. I mean, when I look at the things how far we have come in this industry, because people kind of like rolled up their sleeves and worked together. And, things don't happen automatically. Things happen because people work hard and make them happen. But when you come together and you work hard, dang, yeah, you really can get great stuff done. So those would be a few things I just want people to know.
Well, Jennifer, I do appreciate your time today. I'm glad we could finally make this work.
Oh, Tim, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of it. Everybody out there, stay safe.
Absolutely.